Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Chronic Goes Carnivore. Today we're going to be talking about the ketogenic diet and its role in addiction. So whether or not you're curious about keto, just starting out, or dealing with food cravings, this video is for you. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get started. I first want to start out with a massive disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I am just a person who likes doing research and wants to really understand how the ketogenic diet / carnivore interacts with my body, my chronic illnesses, and my mental struggles. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about your body and your health, please talk to your medical team and get the support that you need as an individual. So first things first, what is the keto diet exactly? So keto is short for ketogenic, which is defined as a low-carb, high-fat diet that includes moderate amount of protein to kick your body into a process where it utilizes ketone bodies instead of glucose that comes from carbs and sugar. Now, carnivore is a subset of keto. Keto typically caps your carb intake at 50 grams of carbs a day. Now, carnivore, the goal is as low carb as possible. I find for myself that about 20 grams of carbs a day is my sweet spot, which I think qualifies me for a hybrid version called Ketovore. I'm not really hung up on the labels, and I use them interchangeably because they are all a version of the ketogenic diet. So the kinds of foods that keto focuses on are things like meat and fish, eggs, cheese and healthy oils, low carb veggies, and small amounts of nuts and seeds. Now, when you're going more towards carnivore, you're cutting out the oils and the nuts and seeds and the vegetables. You're basically just doing meat and animal byproduct. Now, there are some carnivores that restrict even further because cheese and dairy can be inflammatory to some people, and it can promote weight gain if you're eating too much. So how can the ketogenic diet help you just in general? The ketogenic diet is known to promote weight loss, improve your mental clarity, better control your blood pressure, increase your energy and endurance. It has a role in appetite suppression, and on a personal note, I have seen it improve my overall metabolic lab panels. So why would you want to go on a ketogenic diet sans today's current topic? So it's going to help stabilize your blood glucose, which is going to help conditions like diabetes and mental health disorders. It is going to fill you up. You're gonna hit a mark where you're just like, okay, I'm not interested in the food anymore, and that's the point where you stop. It helps with overall inflammation. It helps with on a cellular level, improving your mitochondria organelles, your energy production. I went pretty deep into all of that in my last Chronic Goes Carnivore when I was talking specifically about cerebral palsy. So if you want to go check that out to learn all about the ketogenic diet on a cellular level, I will put the link down in the description below. My goodness. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about food addiction. So food addiction is absolutely not about willpower. It's not something that you can just stop. It is a real physiological and psychological phenomenon that affects millions of people worldwide. Now, when I say food addiction, I'm not talking about, I opened a pack of Oreos and I couldn't help myself. I'm talking about the people who get irritable, yell, scream, throw things when they don't get the food they want, when they fall into a deep depression, when they're craving and not satisfying that drive. I'm talking about the people who struggle with eating disorders, on the side of overconsumption, to some extent underconsumption, because I do believe on a personal level that both sides are obsessed with food. But I struggle with the overconsumption side. So that's the angle that I took this research from. So what is food addiction? Food addiction is the compulsive overeating of hyperpalatable foods. So it's things that are high in carbs, high in sugar, high in fat, high in salt. All the things that your body craves in mass quantities. These are going to activate your food reward pathways in the brain, which is almost identical to what happens when your body intakes things like alcohol and hard substances, leading to craving, loss of control, continued usage despite negative effects. All of the classic addiction symptoms that you see in substances versus food. So what does addiction look like? It looks like craving a substance over and over and over again, even when you don't need it. Specific to food, when you're not hungry. Eating or consuming more than intended. So you sit down, you have a plate, you go for seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, or your first and second portion are massive. Feeling guilty or ashamed after using your substance. So if you sit down and eat an entire tray of brownies, how do you feel after that? My guess, based on personal experience, is that you're going to feel gross. You're going to feel probably sick. You're going to feel shame and like you need to do better next time. And then you get into the psychological grossness that accompanies addiction. You have a difficult time stopping when full. For a lot of us, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, at least for what happens for me, I don't recognize hunger and satiety signals in my body. Like, I have wrecked that reward pathway so spectacularly that I do not recognize when I'm full. And oftentimes what will make me stop is because I feel like I'm going to throw up. Tolerance. You end up needing more and more of that substance to get the same dopamine hit, the same feel-good moment that you had the first time you intook your drug of choice. You start neglecting everything else in favor of your preferred substance. So if you start neglecting your relationships, your kids, your work, nothing else seems joyful because all you want to do is to consume what makes you happy, you have a problem. You have an addiction. Continued use even though you know that it's harmful. If you just can't stop, you don't have the willpower, and other withdrawal symptoms, which could be, but are not limited to, things like convulsions, hallucinations. I mean, that there's a whole lot that I didn't really go into a lot of research on just because my addiction is not in a space where that my brain is going to do that to me upon withdrawing from my substance. What can contribute to an addictive pattern? So there's been some studies that suggest, and most of this is going to be suggest, in theory, what have you, because nobody has done the long-term work on the ketogenic diet. It's still all very new. They don't have long-term studies yet because it is seen as unethical to do them on humans. What we do have is studies in rats. On the studies that they have done in humans, they have found a link between mental disorders like depression, anxiety, other things that involve the brain chemistry, can lead you to be predisposed to addiction because your dopamine levels are lower than they should be naturally. Another thing that plays into this is genetics. Now, I am 100% not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, because Uncle Sam is obese, or Aunt Jane, or mom or dad or grandma, that you are destined to be obese. What they've proven with the ketogenic diet, and I have covered this in past videos, is that you can turn genes on and off to some extent, which means that your cravings and your propensity for certain things, you can fix that. It is 100% in your control. Now, it doesn't fix everything. And there's some genes that we don't understand well enough yet, or just absolutely do not change. But there are a lot of it that you can, in fact, turn on and off based on the food you shove in your face. There could be psychological or emotional factors. So this could be things like a traumatic experience, like I said earlier, depression, anxiety, environmental stressors like schooling, work, kids, spouse. If you're chronically exposed to any fears, stress in the brain is extremely toxic. And it will look for any release of dopamine that it can. Because, and I'll cover this more later, if you're pressing on the pain button in your brain is going to automatically try to balance that out with dopamine. You could also have environmental factors that can contribute. Things like if your household eats unhealthy, you are more likely to follow in their footsteps. I read a study that said that if you have hard substances in the household, you are like 70 to 80% more likely to follow in those same footsteps because it's a modeled behavior, and it's really hard to say no when you're constantly surrounded by that temptation. There's also a caveat here that I want to mention, just because most of the research I found was on generalized addiction and not just food addiction, is that not everybody's brain is wired for the same addiction. So my brain is wired for food, whereas other people I know are wired for alcohol. And there's family members of mine that were wired for both hard substances and alcohol. I have another family member who was all about the cannabinoids. I've known people who struggle with opioids and what have you. Like, no brain is the same, and what will be a drug to one brain might not be a drug to another. But in that same breath, you could have multiple substances that make your brain go burr. So it's all about knowing your body, how it functions, and how to cope with what your brain is doing. which I think is so important. In order to really understand the root of addiction, we're going to talk about two substances in the brain that really power motivation, drive, reward. And the first one is dopamine. So dopamine is a chemical messenger, also known as a neurotransmitter, in the brain that plays a huge role in so many functions. So a neurotransmitter is a very interesting molecule. So in your brain you have, I'm gonna mess up these words, but you have receptors on either side of your neurons, but they don't touch. There's a gap in between where your neurotransmitters sit, where they convey the message from point A to point B. And this is where dopamine sits. It's often referred to as the feel-good chemical, even though that is actually serotonin. So dopamine is more keyed into motivation and reward, not necessarily the act of feeling good. So some of the key features of dopamine are, like I said, motivation and reward, movement, which was super fascinating to learn about, learning and memory, mood and emotion, attention and concentration, and sleep and arousal. So they did some study in rats where they completely extracted dopamine from their brains, and they put food an inch away from them. And these rats would starve to death because they had zero motivation to go get the feel-good thing. But if they placed the food directly into their mouths, they would eat. So dopamine is the substance in your brain that tells the prehistoric part of you, the inner hunter-gatherer, to go get the thing that is going to give you the serotonin, basically, is my understanding. So things like attention and concentration. Dopamine plays a huge role in things like depression, schizophrenia, and ADHD. Because if you are chronically low in dopamine, you're not going to pay attention to anything. You're also not committing things to long-term memory because your body is not able to focus long enough to convert that. Dopamine is also going to be the thing that reinforces a behavior. Your body goes, oh, we have pressed the pleasure button. We want to do that again. It feels good. Keep doing it. Press, 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 press. Now, it also plays a role in your sleep. So it's the thing that's going to help you regulate your sleep cycle, your level of alertness, all that fun stuff. So we're going to switch gears just slightly, and we're going to talk about a molecule called adenosine. So it is a nucleoside in the body, meaning that it is a piece or a building block to molecules like adenosine triphosphate, my goodness, ATP, which I covered extensively in Chronic Ghost Carnivore dealing with cerebral palsy, AMP, which is adenosine monophosphate. It is literally in every single cell of your body, and it plays such a huge role in the psychological processes, particularly those related to energy transfer, which is your ATP, and your sleep regulation. So what exactly is adenosine used for? So we get into kind of a gray area with this because we're not entirely sure what it is and why it's important yet. There's still so much research to be done and more things to learn, but they are 100% showing a correlation between adenosine and addiction. What are the key functions of adenosine? Like I said a second ago, it deals with energy transfer, it deals with sleep regulation, It promotes things like REM cycles and all of that good stuff. Your body throughout the day builds upon adenosine, and then when you sleep, your body flushes that out, which is how you wake up refreshed, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning. It has to do with cardiovascular health. It is a vasodilator. So most of what I found on adenosine is in the realm of cardiovascular. They'll literally inject it into your heart if you have an arrhythmia, because it kind of just shocks your heart back into rhythm. So it's super important to a lot of big processes in the body. It has also been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects and protective functions. So in response to cellular stress, which is oxidative stress, injury, inflammation, the body releases adenosine to protect the tissues and dampen the excessive immunoresponse that your body has when you're injured. It's going to help regulate your inflammatory processes and prevent it from going haywire. So in theory, if you have inflammation problems, it's because you're low in adenosine. It also plays a part in the learning and memory stuff that your body does, pain response. And what they've found is that the level of adenosine in your body increases with the more neural activity that you're doing. So the more your brain is working, the more adenosine you naturally have in your body. But what I found that was super interesting is where dopamine is kind of like an accelerator. It's the go, go, go motivation piece. Adenosine acts as a brake. It goes, whoa, we've had enough. So what do both of these components have to do with addiction? So again, researchers don't have all of the information. But what we have discovered is that when you increase dopamine, your body naturally will go to pain to level out that playing field. Pain and pleasure, so dopamine and pain, are processed in the same spot in the brain. One author I found, and I will link her book down below, and I cannot for the life of me remember her name. She describes it as like a seesaw. So when you load one end of the seesaw with pleasure, your body is going to send, as she describes, little gremlins to bounce up and down on the pain side to rebalance the seesaw, which makes sense. That is the immediate come down you have after you've consumed that substance. That's that shame, that discomfort, that drive to use your particular substance again. So what exactly do these things do for your brain in terms of addiction? So we figured out that the brain functions on about 100 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine on a daily basis. So, for example, getting up in the morning for a typical human being, now I want to be very specific here. I'm not talking about someone with something like depression or anxiety, because your dopamine is going to be lower. However, the average person will wake up with around 50 nanograms of dopamine in their system. Now, if you reduce that to 40 nanograms, that is going to be those days when you feel like crap, you want to stay in your pajamas and not get out of bed. They've also found that when it comes to consuming food, your body hits about 94 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine in your body. It's one of the highest things that will release dopamine. Seconded by intercourse being 92. My brain can function, I promise. nanograms per deciliter. Now, all of this is superseded by the best day you can imagine, which will shoot you to 100 nanograms of dopamine. So having a fantastically wonderful day is the most dopamine that your body will make naturally. So what happens when you intake your substance of choice? That's going to inject you with about 1,000 nanograms of dopamine. So now your body has more dopamine than it knows what to do with. And the problem with this is the next time you go to that food, it's going to inject 900 nanograms, and then 800, and then 7, etc. until you need that substance to get up in the morning. You see it a lot with people and their screens. They need that hit first thing in the morning. They need that hit the last thing at night. For food addicts, it's the immediate caffeine and sugar and a high carb breakfast in the morning. And because dopamine is so sensitive to a change in the stimuli and also new stimuli, it is so easy to transform or worsen your addiction accidentally. One of the things that they really highlighted in a lot of the resources that I found was that particularly when it comes to screen addiction, so phones, computers, whatever, on these apps that you could continually watch another video and consume more content, the algorithms are literally designed to learn your patterns and then feed you that next dopamine fix. That's why marketing works so well. Marketers have figured out how the brain works and have monopolized on that. Like I said before, people with mental illnesses do have a bigger propensity to become addicts because they have a lower amount of dopamine to begin with. So for me, I struggle with major depressive disorder, complex PTSD. It's a whole alphabet soup, anxiety. I can 100% tell you that my day-to-day dopamine is low. And I know that because it is so hard to get out of bed every single day. So anytime that your brain has to struggle to achieve the balance between pain and pleasure, you are risking addiction. So when you are pressing that dopamine side of the scale, your body is going to continue to press the pain button to try to balance. So you're immediately going to have withdrawal symptoms. You're going to be cranky. You're going to be irritated. You're going to be sweating. You're going to be shivering. You're going to, on the extreme end, you're going to have convulsions. You're going to feel all of the effects, headaches, all of it, because your body is trying to get back to neutral. They've also found that there is what they call a latent echo. So your body and your brain remember not only what it feels like to be addicted, even if you're 10 years, 20 years, 30 years post active with your substance of choice. Your body remembers that stimuli. It remembers the people, the place, the who, what, when, where, and why. And if you enter any of that stimulus into your brain is going to go, I want it. Because it remembers the heightened state of being when you are consuming your substance of choice. So how long can these cravings, this withdrawal last? Well, joke's on you. Joke's on me. Because it can last anywhere from 2 weeks to years, depending on how bad your addiction is and how your body functions. With it, without it, all of the factors that make you you will determine how long the withdrawal process is going to take. Now, for me, because I've already done one 60-day challenge of carnivore / keto, I 100% know that it takes me a good 45 days to stop feeling the intense cravings for carbohydrates and sugar. Now, I fell off the wagon pretty bad after the end of the 60 days. And I am 100% feeling it. So when I start my next challenge on September 1st, I'm going to have more contingencies in place. So for me, it's probably going to take closer to years to really get a handle of my addiction. And it could take up to 2 years for most people to finally conquer whatever their addiction is and come back to a state of balance. So how can we help our brain find the balance as we're coming off of these kinds of habits? So it goes without saying, I think, that you need to give your brain a break from whatever it is that is giving you the dopamine hit. So for me, it's really difficult because I can't just stop food. But what I can do is go on a specific way of eating that promotes mitochondrial health, an increase of ATP, a better balance of dopamine, insulin stability, satiety thresholds that are a lot lower. Keto plays a role in oxidative stress, which is huge for addiction. It plays a role in inflammation, which again is also huge in addiction. And by letting my support system know what I'm doing, I am leaning on them to help me keep accountable, to stay away from my dopamine hit. And a lot of the times that means I can't have it in the house, because if I have it in the house, I'm gonna eat it. One of the things that they suggest is meditation, specifically an inward focus. So this is a focus on how you're feeling, what you're thinking, giving you just an overall check-in with your mind and body, and kind of just working through it in a very calm state of mind. You're going to want to get enough sleep, which I struggle with massive amounts of insomnia, so that is going to be super hard for me. However, you want to get enough, specifically REM sleep, which is when your body does the stuff with adenosine that it needs to do. It resets that pain pleasure seesaw. Additionally, tired people reach for sugar. I know when I'm tired, the first thing I go for is a cup of coffee, which, has creamer in it, because I hate black coffee and I can't do just heavy cream yet. But I will reach for the chocolate bars and the cereals and the bagels. Anything that is a quick shot to my blood sugar to get me going, I will go for. And sleep helps with that. So work out daily if you can. If you're in a position where you can even do 5 minutes of movement, whether that's going for a walk or body weight exercises or weights or whatever, move your body. Listen to music that makes you happy. So that's going to release endorphins in your brain. It's going to release the dopamine. It's going to make you happy. You're going to get just an improved mood, which is going to help your drive to use what you've been using. Take 5 to 10 minutes and go be in the sun. So there's, I haven't done enough research into the whys of sun exposure, but vitamin D is very good for you. It also just makes your overall mental health better. So go sit out in the sun for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you can stand it. It's something that I will be implementing here in this next 60-day challenge, just because A, it gets my body moving, and B, like, your girl needs some sun. Reduce your stress when possible. Now, I laughed out loud when I read this one because in society today, when you're so attached to technology and stuff, reducing your stress is nearly impossible. Like, my home life is not bound to change. You know, I will always have an autistic child. My husband's a little weird. You know, the relationships that I have with my family, probably not going to change. You know, if you have a high stress job, if you can, look for a lower stress job. But a lot of people can't do that. So reduce the stress when and where you can. Keeping in mind that the stories you tell yourself are what becomes reality. And I'm not going to get big into the woo-woo new age segment of this, but your brain listens to what you're verbalizing, whether or not you're actually saying it out loud or just in your head. Which is why if you're your biggest bully, you're going to stay a victim. So if you just flip the script even just a little, you're going to improve your chances of not relapsing. So for me, I unintentionally started this in my last 60-day challenge. My goal was to, if I couldn't say something nice about myself when I looked in the mirror, I had to at least acknowledge that I am not the enemy. And I can say that I hit 59 out of 60 days. And it has changed how I view myself. When I look in the mirror, I'm not my biggest villain anymore. I'm an indifferent party. And that is a huge step in the right direction to not relapsing. Another thing that they suggest is activating your flow state. Now, it took me a minute to realize and to figure out what this meant, and I don't know why it took my brain so long to connect it. But basically that means being in the zone. You know, when people say, oh, I was in the zone, time flew, where did all the time go? All of these things are the same thing. So find that activity that lets your brain just relax and do. Whether that's gaming or exercise or painting or drawing or reading, whatever puts you in the zone, do the thing. Make time in your day to do the thing. And connected to this is bring out your inner artist. So they've shown that being creative helps. It helps in making more dopamine. It helps overall happiness. And yeah, so the last point makes 100% sense based on what I've learned, but it took me a minute to really ingest it. And that is feel pain every once in a while. Now, I'm not saying go burn yourself. They're not saying go burn yourself. They're saying sit in the discomfort of what's going on. So many times in this world of high dopamine, high access, we feel discomfort and we run. We change our focus. We don't just sit there and do the hard things. And I am 100% guilty of doing this. If you're uncomfortable, that's not a bad thing. It helps your body reset that pain-pleasure balance. And it also is the place where you grow. It's why that old cliche adage is, no progress was made in your comfort zone. Because it's true. If you stay where you're at, you're going to be stagnant. You're going to relapse. That is a proven point in what I've learned. And furthermore, as just a weird point that just popped up into my brain that I haven't covered yet, dopamine is part of that motivation piece with dopamine is, oh crap, I just lost it. Found it. Dopamine is the thing that is ascribed to willpower. So when you don't have willpower, you have low dopamine. You have below that standard 50 nanograms of dopamine, you're not motivated. Pure enough. Pure, simple, end of story. So you cannot rely on motivation. You have to build the habits. You have to tell yourself, feel the pain, sit in the discomfort. I don't want to do this thing. Go do it anyways. Myself included. 100% calling myself out on this. You cannot wait for the motivation to strike you, because if it's a dopamine deficit, it's never going to happen. Period. End of. So sit in your discomfort. Do it anyways. Celebrate. Even if it's a small victory. Even if it's, oh, I drank one more bottle of water than I usually do. Give yourself a sticker. Give yourself a little hit of dopamine. Especially if you are pushing yourself on a really hard thing that is pressing your pain side of the scale down. Give yourself a shot of dopamine. Help strike that balance. Help your body maintain that balance as much as possible. And you're going to find the withdrawal process is going to be a lot easier. It's also going to be a lot more fun. And it might even be a little quicker. So again, what does keto have to do with this? So like I said earlier, there is no long-term studies on keto. So all of this is just take it or leave it. You're going to stabilize your blood sugar. And specifically for an alcohol problem, they've shown that people with that particular problem reach for sugary substance more often than any other dependency. And if you regulate your blood glucose so it's even keel instead of dumping you on your ass, you're gonna feel better. You're gonna abstain better. Keto helps reduce that reward response, that drive, that need to flood your body with dopamine. It controls satiety. So specifically for those of us who struggle with a food addiction, it's going to help control that need to eat. Other withdrawal symptoms / relapse stuff that the ketogenic diet touches is it helps fix your mitochondrial organelles, which are caused, like death and damage are caused by addiction. So it helps repair that, which increases your ATP and your adenosine and your dopamine, and it all feeds into this cycle. It's going to help reduce your oxidative stress and your inflammation that play a role in relapse. So the more cell death you have from oxidative stress, the less willpower you're going to have to stay away. And while I'm thinking about it, small diatribe, decision fatigue is part of the dopamine cycle. So why everyone says, and I 100% know that by the end of the day, I'm more likely to reach for something sweet because I'm a food addict. They have shown that at the beginning of the day, you can start out with, say, I don't need that. And your next thought is, You're full of it. I need that. You are now fighting that impulse every other moment of the day. And by the time you get to the end of the day, there is no willpower. Your dopamine is depleted. And you are now pressing on the pain side of things, and you're craving everything. Which is when those coping skills on increasing dopamine come into effect. Go do something that gives you a shot of dopamine that is away from your addiction. For me, it's being up here in my office. It's not going back downstairs where my kitchen is after I put my child to bed. Which is, it's silly. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that I have to physically remove myself from my kitchen or I will eat. So for me, I stay away from the kitchen. I stay away from that trigger. I have discovered a couple of artistic outlets that I'm getting into. One of them is painting my nails. I find that the act of picking the nail polish off helps with the cravings, because it's giving my hands something to do while I chew on like a pen or pencil. It's fulfilling both the need for my hands to be doing something and my mouth to be doing something, which is a trigger for me. I've discovered diamond painting. It's something that I love watching the videos. And I've looked at them for several years now, and gotta say, it is relaxing. It gets me into that flow state. 2 hours goes by like that. And then by the time that happens, it's bedtime. It's time to go brush my teeth and go read a book. So keep that in mind, that the end of the day is going to be your worst enemy, and you need to have things in place, coping skills, what have you, an activity pre-planned to get you over that initial craving, and then get your mind in the right mindset to go, yeah, no, I got that dopamine release from said artistic pursuit or learning endeavor or workout that I'm so exhausted, but I have that runner's high that I don't need the substance that I'm used to having. Okay. Tangent aside, so keto helps reduce convulsions, which are seen in the severe withdrawal cases. We know this because the ketogenic diet was developed for epilepsy. It's still used for children with epilepsy who are treatment resistant. It also impacts anxiety disorders. I haven't done a lot of research into it. I need to. I'm going to. But ketogenic diet has shown to play a role in decreasing your anxiety. It promotes gene expressive changes, which I talked about ad nauseum earlier. It also changes your quantities and your quality of things like dopamine and adenosine and your reward pathways. So there you have it. Keto isn't just about cutting carbs and losing weight. It's a science-backed approach that can offer real benefits, especially those struggling with addiction and weight loss problems, mental clarity issues, and appetite control issues. Keto has a lot to offer. Just remember that every journey is personal, and what may work for me may not work for you. So try it out. See what works, see what doesn't. Find that happy space for your brain and your system. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment about what you think about what I've found. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you have a story that matches or disagrees with what I've found? I want to hear your stories. I would love to build a community where we can have disagreements and agreements and just support each other. And share your story. You never know who it's going to inspire, who it's going to push to go and try and be better. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.